Hello, everyone, and welcome to Crimson Falls. We are so delighted to welcome you all into our little town. Come, stay a while, and perhaps you'll learn something new. Alright, thank you, everybody, for clicking on this video and checking this out. This is the first episode of my little fiction project that I will be doing. If you want more details on what this project is, you can go look at my announcement video that I posted right before this one, and you can learn more about it there. But for now, we are just going to go straight into the first episode, and hopefully you'll enjoy it. There's not much to say in terms of explanation, but, just these first couple of stories might not make sense immediately, but I promise eventually they will make sense in the grand scheme of the story. But for now, I hope you all enjoy the beginning of something. The office break room was always too cold. The clock always ticked, although the time was never accurate. The refrigerator in the corner always hummed, a little bit louder than it should. Some things in the world lived in absolutes. But today, the world shifted somehow. And now, here she was. Julia sat in that old, still freezing break room and thought to herself, something big is going to happen today. It wasn't a question, more like confirmation. Almost on cue, the door to the break room opened and the head researcher for the facility, Dr. De La Cruz, poked his head in. There you are, Dr. Morgan. Come with me, please, he said, pulling his head back, waiting for her to follow. She stood up and moved to walk. Is everything okay, doctor? She asked, wondering what reason he would have to call her specifically. Unfortunately, in the context of this situation, that is a complicated question with an even more complicated answer. The pair exited the office and made their way to the main facility. The cold winter air bit at her cheeks as she eyed the chain-link fence that surrounded the entire compound, hearing the rattling of the old sign that read, Nova Institute, as the wind blew stronger for a moment. Dr. De La Cruz spoke up again. Has anyone ever told you the story of Subject 17? Julia's lips tightened as she registered the question. Sort of. I know they're the subject that has been under the supervision of the board the longest, but nothing deeper than that. If you know that much, you must also know that they have refused to speak to us in any capacity since they were moved to containment. She simply nodded. They entered the building and made their way down the long hallway. The bright white walls were almost blinding under the fluorescent lights hanging overhead. Reaching the end of the hall, Dr. De La Cruz pushed a button to call an elevator. A loud clunk signaled its arrival as the large metal doors opened. The two stepped inside. Julia wobbled in place, the sudden descent throwing off her balance. Where are we going, Doctor? She asked, confused and growing by the minute. Isn't it obvious? He asked calmly. We're going to speak with 17. Call it a foolish hypothesis, but I have a reason to believe you may be able to get through to them. Her eyes widened slightly, but she thought about the notion for a moment. It didn't seem impossible. Hopefully I can provide a useful conclusion, she responded. They both sat in silence as the elevator continued to descend. After a while, the elevator came to a stop and shook. The doors opened to reveal another white hallway, this one slightly less blinding than the one upstairs. Where the hallway upstairs had many doors that led to many different rooms in the facility, this hallway only had 5 doors. 2 on the right, 2 on the left, and 1 in a straight line from the elevator. The pair walked straight down the hall to the door on the far end. Julia glanced at the other 4 doors. She noticed that they were all built with a different metal than the ones upstairs. These doors seemed designed to be nearly indestructible. Stopping in front of the door, Dr. De La Cruz turned towards her. As much as I'd like to join you, this is where we part ways. Wait, you're leaving me down here with them? Isn't that a security issue? She asked. He smirked slightly and shook his head. Trust me, if they wanted to hurt any of us, they would have done so a long time ago. Plus, the room is under constant video surveillance. If anything happens, a whole security detail will be down here in no time. She nodded as he spoke, taking in his words and taking a deep breath. He patted her shoulder and walked back to the elevator. Julia turns towards the door and reached for the handle. She pushed downwards and a large metallic thunk echoed through the hall. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. The lights in the room were dimmer than the hallway. The walls were stark white like the rest of the building. A lone figure sat in the corner of the room, not looking up at her, head pointed toward the floor. She stepped into the room further and closed the door behind her. "Hello, my name is Dr. Morgan," she said, waiting for a response. The figure did not react. "Is it possible for me to know your name?" Again, the figure did not move. She sighed and glanced around the room. She noticed a small plastic container by the door that held a large file filled with papers. She reached down and pulled it up, struggling to grab it for a moment. The front of the file simply read, Subject 17. She walked over to the small table in the room and sat down, thumbing through the various pages of information. After a moment of searching, one paper in particular caught her attention. The incident. May 10th, 1980. She read aloud, and the figure in the room lifted their head slightly. She noticed the movement and turned her attention towards them. "You don't have to tell me your name, but can you at least tell me what this incident is about?" she asked, hoping to get more of a reaction. To her surprise, the figure met her eyes. Their eyes were a piercing shade of green. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you. No one ever does." They spoke in a soft voice, barely audible. "Well, I know nothing about you. I've only been here a year, and no one tells me anything. I promise, if you want to share, I will let you speak, and I will try my best to understand your situation, no matter how crazy." The figure's eyes narrowed for a second before they slowly stood and walked towards the table. They took a seat on the opposite side of the table and met Julia's eyes once more. "It's a very complicated story. I'm not entirely sure where to start." Julia gave them a genuine smile. "How about you start at the beginning?"